some of your experiences. In the mid-'80s here in New Haven, I was bused to Wallingford, and I was one of maybe 7, 8 black kids that went to Lyman Hall High School. And most of us were athletes. And as you had the fellas running the track, I sat here and I thought I probably was able and aided in running around every hurdle on the track. But I also want to say I'm glad that you did make this film. It means a lot to me personally. But in the movie, you said that you drank the Kool-Aid and you still do. Do you still drink the Kool-Aid?
Yeah, I have fun to ask that question. You know, that shot comes at the end of what's like Act 1. And I kept it in there because it's a heavy and controversial moment. No, I don't do the Kool-Aid anymore. You know, that was my first day of interviewing. You know, and I'm just talking and talking and talking and making it. And, you know, as you can see, I don't have an issue with being vulnerable and exposing everything. That was a moment. I really think I thought that at that moment and was still speaking that way. You know.
And I also found it, you know, it was like I watched the clothing that you wore in the pictures, and even though you were at this prestigious prep school, you still were old. You still were somewhat flamboyant. And as you were doing the shooting, you still had high-end limited edition Nikes.
Oh yeah, of course, that's what's up.
So, you know, as much as we change as we grow and we become more integrated into the world around us, there's certain things that we still hold on to.
Sure.
But at the same time, that you say that you don't drink the Kool-Aid anymore, I think that to me, I think that means that you understand that the world as a whole somewhat remains the same and changes very incrementally. And it is us as individuals that change. And without movies like this, the world is going to be stagnant, and that is why I appreciate it.
Great, thank you. That's what's up, as the kids say. I think you know, that sneaker, that was not that. I mean, I'm a sneakerhead. I love sneakers, and those were all the things I wanted when I was little. And my mother was like, "No, you know, we can't afford it." She just said she put a word before that "no," you know. And when I grew up and like made a movie, I was like, "Ooh, I want these, and I want these, and I want these." And that's what I got them. And I had a really beautiful moment at a private school in New England where a young girl came up to me and she said, "This may sound so silly, but it means so much to me to see you up there speaking," because then I had my Uptown, my grade. You should see I had my Black History Month period. We'll go into that later. But I had my Uptowns on, and she said it meant so much to see someone speaking. And she said it so well and doing so much important work and wearing the sneakers that she could relate to, because it showed herself on screen and brought her in. And I said, yeah, that's a beautiful, it's maybe a simple moment, but it's a really beautiful moment, you know. And it is, drinking the Kool-Aid is a complicated phrase and moment. I'll tell a quick little story. Joan Countryman, who was the first African-American graduate and who was the first head of Oprah Winfrey's, first African graduate at Georgetown Friends School, first to matriculate and graduate. And then she also went on to be the head of Oprah's Freedom Academy in South Africa. That was my 11th grade calculus teacher. And I was showing the film at U Michigan, this was early on, and I talked about the film and I said, I wouldn't be standing here today if it wasn't for Georgetown Friends School. And her son, Matthew Countryman, who also went to the school, he raised his hand and said, I want you to think about that statement. I want you to really, really think about what you're saying there. And I had to step back and pause, and I got what he was getting at, you know, that, and it's interesting how you can be the messenger and not hear your own message sometimes, you know, where I was like, no matter where I would have gone, hopefully I'd like to believe the person that I am would have gotten me to where I am now. You know, GFS was a great tool and a great instrument to get me there, a great vehicle, I should say, to get me there. But it's important to really look inside and think about what you have and look at that internal strength and power, you know, here and where they meet, and use that as you go forward and tell your stories and write and teach and direct and whatever you want to in this world too. Push for change. So thank you.
Be possible for creating it or just about your life as you reflect upon it? My second question is, especially as you discussed making this or creating something that conveys similar messages, as you seek to kind of convey the message that you did in this film to a wide audience, widely black.
Direct after making the film. That's a tricky one. I'm not sure I have a list of regrets that come to mind when I thought after making. When I first made it, I was very unhappy with the length, you know. on a real surface level there. But in terms of, I don't think I had any real regrets in terms of making the process. There are a number of scenes that are just not in the film that didn't make it, that didn't fit with the story. So I have to think about that one a bit more, because off the top of my head, I can't think of regrets that I have and I remember after the process. And in terms of, is this the best story? I'll push back on that and say, it's the best story that I can tell, and I stand by my story. I'm very happy to communicate it. And I encourage anyone that thinks that they have a better story to get out there and tell it. That's why I put this up there. When I first read Lorraine Carey's book, Black Ice, my junior year in high school and college, I read it and I thought, whoa, my story is relevant and important. Let me get out there and make it happen, And then 20-something years later, I come to make a film called The Prep School of Negro, and I walk into the offices in Hollywood, and like, the prep school, what? No one wants to see that. And I got rejected by everybody. And I found some individual family that put the money behind it. And right now, I have a literary agent, but the publishing world has said to me again and again, like, well, the book isn't really relevant because we sort of have one of those that happened just over 10 years or so ago. And they're referring to Lorraine Carey's Black Ice. And I was like, actually, it was 20 years ago, but I hear what you're saying, So I think the story is really important and crucial, and I encourage many people to try to tell their version of the stories that are out there. I don't, in terms of whether this is the best way to tell and approach it, I won't sort of touch that beyond saying it's the best that I can do and I can see as an artist. I really stand by it and feel very proud of it. And I've seen thousands of people affected by it around the country. And I think the reason why this expansion has happened so much is it's right from this one moment where a screening in San Francisco, this older white woman killed and I fell to my arms and started crying, and I was like, there, and she communicated, she said, you helped me think about grieving, which I didn't, wasn't an intention of the movie. I was just working as an artist blindly, trying to tell a story that I had decided I needed. I needed that personal catharsis. It's going to save my life, in lots of ways. So, regrets, that's a tricky one. I have to think about that. I can't say, besides some editing choices, and maybe putting myself there singing, And in terms of, is this the best story? Once again, I'll stress that it is the best story that I can tell, And I encourage anyone else to find ways to communicate and tell their stories. The world is a huge and wide, varied place,
And it was crazy. My mom would always pick me up from school. Then my sister would she would pick my sister up from school. And it was crazy how we went from North Philadelphia to where the William Penn Charter School was out there in Germantown. It was just like a world awakening. It's like a whole two different worlds. And it was my first exposure to, I guess, a world of riches and a world of something different. Every time we went to go pick her up, we went to play sports. You have to do a sport in private school like that, small sport. So for me, what I was interested in learning from you is I saw that you looked at the Friends schools, which was really interesting. Most of the Friends school, I went to a private school, a Catholic independent school, really conservative, really racist. Most Friends schools, I went to LaSalle High School, LaSalle College. Yeah, it was rough. It was rough. It's like a Catholic all-boys fraternity. But the Friends schools, when I went there, I'd always felt there was a little bit more of a welcoming spirit going on at those schools, more so than other private schools. I thought that was a much better experience, especially with my sister. She would always tell me that's when she went to that Catholic school. So I was wanting to know what made you decide to just focus on those few Friends schools rather than maybe you didn't look into, I guess, the boarding schools like the Exeters, the Andovers, or any of the Catholic independent. What made you decide to focus on? It was crazy. My mom would always pick me up from school. Then my sister would pick my sister up from school. And it was crazy how we went from North Philadelphia to where the William Penn Charter School was out there in Germantown. It was just like a world awakening. It's like a whole two different worlds. And it was my first exposure to, I guess, a world of riches and a world of something different. Every time we went to go pick her up, we went to play sports. You have to do a sport in private school like that, small sport. So for me, what I was interested in learning from you is I saw that you looked at the friend schools, which was really interesting. Most of the friend school, I went to a private school, a Catholic independent school, really conservative, really racist. Most friend schools, I went to LaSalle High School, yeah, it was rough. It was rough. It's like a Catholic all boys fraternity. But the friend schools, when I went there, I'd always felt there was a little bit more of a welcoming spirit going on at those schools, more so than other private schools. I thought that was a much better experience, especially with my sister. She would always tell me that's when she went to that Catholic school. So I was wanting to know what made you decide to just focus on those few friend schools rather than maybe you didn't look into, I guess, the boarding schools like, you know, the Exeters, the Vandovers, or any of the Catholic independent, like, what made you decide just to
William Faulkner, they all have said in their writings and their work, write what you know. You know, start from the story that you know and understand. I didn't go to boarding school. You know, I didn't go to some of the other private schools. I went to Quaker school, and I understood that philosophy and that approach. So I really decided to stick in to try and hone in my story and use my tale as a sparring story to get us through. That really was the artistic choice of saying, okay, this is what I know, and I have to go in this direction to tell my story in that sense. And I mean, I went to a Catholic elementary school, but this isn't what the story was about. So it really came down to that, you know. And I remember walking into, and I've said it to GFS, you know, like it was a great place, and it was also a very complicated place. And I think there was a lot of racial naivete that mean folks who were in charge that I had, and they weren't challenged with it because folks couldn't really come forward. Folks didn't come forward in a strong way to go against some of it, you know. And it is true that that talks about the complexity that exists in these schools. I remember the first day going in, you know, and one was actually saw somebody humming along to the Jerusalem song, which I thought was pretty cool, but which was the school anthem, which I walked in and I was like, what is this song? Jerusalem? This is the school anthem. But the thing I did hear from the first day, when I said, what's Quakerism about? Is it the people in the box, the oats, you know, was that kid not green? And I was told, no, you know, the basic premise is there is good in every single person. And you need to look for that light, that God inside of a person, and move forward that way. That's how we start. You know, and I thought, wow, this is pretty intense. And I was like, okay, I'm in. You know, I like that approach. Let's go forward. So my very long answer is that I had to tell a story that I knew. You know, I went to a few boarding schools, and I went to schools in South Carolina, and I'm like, but I found that
double consciousness,
the best way to tell
and the term that you're using, psychological homelessness. And so I'm wondering, having identified the problem, if in the course of your travels and conversations and interactions with independent schools and the students themselves, if you've heard of any solutions to the condition, or do the schools have any role or responsibility in addressing that issue? Now that it's known what the tolls are, what the consequences are, what, if anything, can and should be done?
Often thought, what am I going to say when the school says, what do we do? You know, and I came up with an answer, and my thought is, once you understand the intention of that question, you'll begin to find the answers. You know, I think that some of the practical changes, because I refuse to walk into a powerful conversation about how this school can be a better school deals with diversity. I don't think that's an answer. You know, but I have said this. You know, I've been fortunate to sit on lots of heads of schools. You know, around the fireplace with cognac. You know, Andre, what should we do here? You know, and right, so exactly. Some practical answers, I think, are familial involvement. You know, when a family comes in, the family should do a social contract. We are all in this school together. You know, it's not just sending our child to a better place. We need to be committed as much as we can. And the schools are doing responsibility for reaching out to families. You know, my situation was extreme with the factory. You know, imagine, my mother worked in a factory just like you see in the movies, with a man in a glass box and like 100 plus women on the floor. Imagine the moment of having to go and have lemon bars at the end of the day. Talk about the curriculum at Germantown Friends School. It takes a lot for anyone, you know, to reach and achieve. So my thought is, schools finding a way to say, okay, let's lose this notion that we have nothing in common, and realize we have the most important thing, the role in common, the child in common. So I think families commitment and the school commitment to the family on commitment on both sides, not the family. I think also to stress what I said about your question, the second question you asked, is the school's responsibility? Yes, it's the school's responsibility. It's the school's responsibility to every single child in the school, you know, and to go further in certain situations where they see a need, where there's a need. You know, I just had this, I showed this in Detroit at a conference last week, I think, and someone spoke, you know, a gentleman who's wearing his braces, and he had answered, you know, he said, I'm watching and I'm thinking, if these people of color are having a hard time in the schools, are we doing a disservice by bringing them in and not giving a scholarship to someone else who isn't in that situation to come into the school? And I said, you know, if the basketball team doesn't win a championship, do you ask all of them to leave, or do you coach them to be a better team next year and encourage them to keep trying? You know, because I think it's a mistake to say it's too hard, we can't do anything. We have to rally around these people, rally around ourselves, and rally around each other, and find a solution, and not see it as some extreme, you know, separate other, you know, Black History Month or Diversity Day example. This should be a part of our entire curriculum to talk about how we're bringing our whole society inside and understanding what students are facing. I think that's a school's responsibility, you know. And then what the situation we're talking about, which is a bit, you know, more, it has to be stressed. I'll tell the story we're talking about today. Elizabeth Alexander, who works here at the school, she was my 11th grade English teacher. And one summer, she sat me down, actually at the end of one year, she said, Andre, you know, you can't write. She's head of FM department, English department. Yes. FM department. Elizabeth Alexander, wonderful woman, I love her to death. She sat me down and she said, Andre, you can't write. And I was like, what does that mean? And she said, you're not a great writer. You're a great person, you're getting along well, you have lots of friends, but your writing skills are not where they need to be. And we sat down one summer and we read Ralph Ellenson's Invisible Man. And she had me read the intro 5 times. And she had me develop an essay question that would turn to a 5-page essay. This is the summer. You know, I'm like, Elizabeth, really? You know? And the first time I handed the paper back to her, she said, okay, where are you going? And I was like, I finished. She's like, no, we're going to edit this paper together. So we sat down and we got it read down and we went through it together. She's like, this is how you write. You write, you write, you write, you write, you edit. You write, you write, you write, you write, you edit. She said, it's a skill set, and you can do this. Another example was another teacher, who was a very controversial teacher, I can say his name, Peter Renka, who taught the canon. You know, and we fought and fought and fought, and finally he got Toni Morrison into the canon before she had the Nobel Prize. So go like high school seniors fight for that. But he, one year, my senior, he had an English course. It was Peter Renka's English course. You got to that class, you officially graduated, you could go into the world and make a difference. And he, his idea was, I'm going to teach you all how to show what you're writing instead of telling what you're writing. And in 11th grade, you're like, what does that mean? You know, English class, 3rd or 4th week into the semester, I was bombing on the quizzes, you know, and I was not doing well. He said, Andre, we need to meet. We met. He said, show me a lexicon. And I said, what's a lexicon? You know, he said, Andre, what's your dictionary? And I pulled up my dictionary, and it was my sister's Webster's Intermediate Pocket Dictionary from her high school, Germantown High School. And it was missing A through D. And that's what I had, you know, that's the resources I had. He walked into the bookstore, pulled off the shelf the Webster's Intercollegiate Dictionary, you know, and handed it to me. He said, this is your new lexicon. And I said, great, you know. End of the day, there was a poster on our senior board where the notes were, and it said, Andre, you owe me $19.95 for the book we bought in the library, or the bookstore. And I was like, man, I felt kind of tricked. But I looking back at the lessons on both sides, where I wasn't treated as a charity case. I was taught to own the experience. You know, this is tough, this is hard. I'm not going to say, oh, you poor little black kid. I'm going to say, what's the problem? Let's work together and figure it out, and let's solve it and move forward. That should be the approach with every student, you know. And sometimes, as I will stress, in certain situations in which I need it, there's extra work that needs to happen, you know, and it's a matter of finding the people that can take part in that. So family, work with the student. I also think faculty or staff of color is crucial and very important, you know, and it's a lot harder than I thought it would be. I walked into these schools saying, hire more people of color. But as I've been learning about some of these schools that are in remote locations, and salaries,
about experiencing you and your peers at Germantown Prep School. As you know, I arrived at Germantown Prep School after being Secretary of University here, but before that I had been Dean of Students, so I was at the birth of co-education and watching Yale go from 3% of color to 25% of color during the years I was in Dean's office. The greatest challenge that that an administrator who wants to change a place, even a friend's school, is getting the faculty to accept your presence, being genuinely accept your presence as integral parts of it. And you may recall during that 5 years, I tripled the faculty of color. In fact, I don't think I hired anyone who wasn't, which means I was in violation of the law, but I also promoted those people to positions of leadership, and they all went on to run their own schools. But the important thing was that I used you and your peers as clubs to change the institution. The classics department changed the curriculum for you.
Work it out.
The classics department discovered African people.
I know, right?
And
the whole compliment.
So the point is, the institutions have an enormous job if they're going to make it possible for students.
Every day she wasn't a black woman. Every day she wasn't there. Where's Sharon? Where's Sharon? Where's Sharon? And Sharon went on to be the head of, she's now head of the math department. Every time I see her, she says, you know, it was you.
So the dean, head of the upper school.
Yeah, exactly. And what Sharon says also, she's like, it was you and Dana asking where I was. I think helped me get hired. The school was like, oh, these kids.
It was a white girl and a black girl. That's just how it was. And that was 2003. And just in 2008 did they decide finally they were going to have just one and not separate us. But I saw a lot of photos with you, with the students, white, black, just kind of mixing. And I want to know your experiences now teaching and going to different schools. Do you feel like the students are playing an integral role in trying to connect in a way in which maybe in the 80s they didn't do as much? Or, you know, I mean, obviously you did because you have these photos, right? But do you feel like the students, I feel like one of the main reasons for my high school why they got rid of these separate homecoming queens is because the students were like, look, you know, we've been together for a while, it's time. You know, so do you feel like that's something that can be promoted or something that you see going to these different schools and universities?
Yeah, I definitely see a difference. I see a big difference. It's interesting though because many folks have said this at like elementary school up to 7th grade, everything's fine, and all of a sudden in 8th, 9th grade, the divide begins. And I'm like, well, that's because it's dating and socializing. That's when it happens and people start going off in their own little splinters. I think, or splintering off, I should say, into all little sections. I think that, but it has changed, you know, and crazy as it may seem, I think we have a lot of pop culture to thank for that. You know, people see different music and the like, which is another long story. But in terms of what I've seen in these schools, things change, but they still stay the same. They still stay the same. I think that there's less of a divide than when we were in school in the 80s, but there's still a big separation and a big gap, you know, in terms of people having real, I think, in my own personal observation, real intense and good experiences. Because what happens, you know, is when I go to schools, when people respond to the black table scene, you know, I still get people who are like, oh, those children are segregating themselves. And I'm like, that's a big word to put on a high school lunch table. You know, it could just be lunch, you know, and there's the timbre of voices at that table match with them. They're feeling comfortable in that space. Do you do that all day long? You know, for us to come together, when can a conversation, this is one small point in it, but when can a conversation begin to happen where we say, you know what you're saying and experience is valid. It's different from mine, but I'm not going to turn away because I'm afraid of it or having prejudice or racism scared. You know, as opposed, I'm going to turn around and try and get into it. I don't see that true connection happening as much as I would like to. I see more exposure and more togetherness, but in terms of the changes happening, I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, it's changed about 5%. Or it's changed halfway. It's going there. The students are different, the world is different, and they're more open. But I still think on some a real deeper and more important level, that level of communication and acceptance of each other as equal has not happened. It has not happened, and especially in the schools. And it's real complicated now because folks are like, oh, this is the Jay-Z, I'm down. And it's like, no, that's not what it's about. You know, and it's not one black friend, it's 3 black friends. And it's like, no, that's not what it's about either. You know, it's about how are you really truly related to this human being on a human level in assuming they have the same intellectual capacity first, and then getting to a space. And I tell kids, you know, we all pass judgment. It's impossible to pass judgment. It's important to make sure that judgment doesn't carry weight. You know, when you go into a situation, judge, forgive yourself, and then move on. You know, so change a lot. Much further to go.
And I just like to comment on what you just last said. There is a difference, but there's also still that that factor of like, yeah, we can all get together and yeah, we'll talk to each other. But when it comes down to it, when it comes down to the deal, when it needs to happen, there's always still a separation. And then concerning the I had a couple of questions. First, I know you said that you only talk about what you know. Did you ever consider how your life would be different had you gone to boarding school, your relationship with your sister, your family, with your neighborhood? And also, like in the pictures, were there a lot of, not a lot, but how many Black people were in your year when you went to Germantown? And did you relate to them? Could you relate to them? Were they from the same background as you? And then I think my third one is, how do you feel watching, when you watch the scene of
I got a bowl from St. Paul. You know what that means. You know what that means, right? Yes, I went to St. Paul twice. We'll talk about that later. So I want to get to these questions. Now I don't remember. Well, in terms of people of color, there were 7.5 in my class, one biracial kid, and we joked about it, they have, so it was cool. And I did relate to them all. We were different people, with different sex, and one of them had a big issue with me because I was lower class. You know, we got past that and developed a friendship because he was so like, you're so different from me, I can't relate to you. You know, and I was so like, what do you mean? You know, it was confusing in 9th grade. Now as adults, you know, we have a very different relationship. And we joke about it. I'll tell a quick little story that is about, to reflect the first part you talked about in terms of change and like, I have a friend who went to Germantown Friends School also, who was like the official Republican in the school. And he was I'm a real minority leader at GFS. And we're still friends to this day, and now we're having a long fight about affirmative action. He thinks it's a mistake, I think it's something we need, but long conversation. I go to his house for Sunday nights for dinner. I go to his house for dinner on Sunday nights. And he has 2 little boys, and they're 8 and 7, and they're really rambunctious and great, and just run around the house. And we were at dinner, and this is to sort of give some more to this first question here. We were at dinner, and I pulled out my iPhone, and there's a picture of my godson, and he goes, oh, was that you when you were little? And I was like, no. I said, no, that's my godson, and they're of the Jewish faith. And so the kid was like, what's a godson? And I was like, oh, you know, that is like, if something happens to the parents, I'll come in and take care of the kid and help raise him. And he said, oh, and they're quiet, and he goes, so you're like Sirius Black, you know? And you saw the mother of the kitchen kind of freeze, like, and the father of the table was just like, oh my God. And we realized, people don't know, Sirius Black is a character from Harry Potter. He's Harry Potter's godfather. So they made a reference. So it was such a moment, you know. And the intense conversation that we have, while we think so differently, is so important, you know. And I even like get in there, like trying to get the kids at 7 and 8, like, you know what? I know your father said, but, you know. So the conversation does go further. 7.5, and I did relate to all of them. What was the other one?
Boarding school.
Oh, boarding school. I don't know. You know, I don't think I could have done the boarding school thing. You know, as much as I flipped out when I got to college and someone was cooking, I don't know if I could have handled that in 9th grade. You know, that's kind of a superficial moment, but I don't think a boarding school was what I needed. I think the day school was, I needed to get that back and forth. You know, because I think that separation would have been too much. You know, sometimes the universe steps in and handles situations for you. A higher power comes in and says, okay, let's make this work. Because I don't know what would happen. But I don't think it was.
No formal remarks other than to say thank you once again to Andre. There's an event here in a little while, but hopefully we can make our way out and continue the conversation briefly at the door. Thanks for coming, Steve.